Hi and welcome to the Active Code podcast, brought to you by Aspire Active Partnerships. I'm Paul Griffiths, and joining me each week on the pod is Luke Johnson.
Aspire Active Partnerships is a community of like-minded business leaders who all believe that collaboration in the sports coaching and children's activity sector is essential for success. We've proven that working in collaboration does benefit business growth and essentially helps more children be more active more often.
To combat physical inactivity, we need organisations that are performing at their very best. Organisations will only operate to high standards if they are led well. So, if we can focus on developing high quality leaders throughout an organisation, not just at the top, customers will experience higher quality services, which means heightened enjoyment levels and increased levels of physical activity. And if we do this at an early age, we know that we can build the foundations for a more active, happier and healthier life. The Active Code investigates what it really takes to be a successful leader and how organisations can combat physical inactivity.
We won't be alone through this journey. We are joined by business owners and experts from our sector, as well as inspirational people from outside our industry. We'll understand the importance of physical activity to our guests, reflect on leadership experiences, and gain thought-provoking insights on how we can crack the Active Code and get more children more active more often. If you like what you hear, please leave us a rating and subscribe.
John Mulholland, welcome to the Active Code podcast. It's great to have you here on this episode.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me on.
It's great to have you here. John, you wear many hats in your professional life. Could you give the listeners an insight into the different roles and businesses that you are involved in?
Surely, yeah. So first and foremost, I would regard myself as an educator. So I'm actually a secondary school teacher. I specialise in A-level geography, believe it or not. But secondary, I am a director at a fast-paced sports coaching company called Fiesta Sports Coaching. And believe it or not, I'm also a property developer. So I have done several small-scale property developments, several refurbs. I've been investing in property for 20 years, and I specialise in raising finance and raising capital. So many hats, I'd agree.
John, how do you find time to do all of that?
I'm good at the pivot. I'm good at planning, but also just having a drive and an ambition to do more, really. I mean, when I was first a teacher, I was finding that I was wanting things to do in the holidays. I'm not one of those people that sort of sits around and there's only so much lesson planning you can do. So that was something I've always enjoyed doing, pivoting, pushing myself to do more.
And what is your passion? There's three things you've listed there. So where does most of your passion lie?
So believe it or not, I'm passionate about business and running a business. Something I wanted to do ever since I was very young. And when I first started teaching, I knew that I wanted to go into business as well. And, it made sense. So when I first started teaching, I was kind of using the holidays. I was working at Manchester United soccer schools. I worked at Gordonston International Summer School, Oppingham Summer School. And I wanted to kind of then convert that into a business, really, where it was using the business side of things, but also that passion for sports and activity as well. And that's where Fiesta Sports Coaching was born, really, alongside my co-director, Vicky Gallagher. We set up Fiesta de Football back in the day, back in 2020, 2012. And we were initially running like sports camps and football camps in the summer and in the holidays.
And it's evolved a fair bit since then. So just want to kind of give the listeners an insight into where Fiesta is now, where you operate, how you support schools.
Yeah, surely. So Fiesta Sports Coaching is based in the East Midlands. We're based in Corby, Kettering, a little bit into Leicestershire, so Market Harborough, Southern Leicestershire as well. And yeah, so it definitely has evolved. As I said, when we first started, we were called Fiesta de Football. It was around about that time, sort of 2012, where the Spanish football teams were doing really well. And we were kind of, inspired by that. Barcelona, Real Madrid, they still are doing well, but it was the time when that amazing Spain team was winning everything. And we started off with holiday camps, mainly football. And then over the years, by 2018, we'd started to do in-school programs, so curriculum PE. And then it's expanded to things like wraparounds. We're a swim ed provider. And we do all sorts now. So it's very much a sports coaching and education company now, not just, football camps.
And when it you've had a lot of experience as a business owner with Fiesta. So what challenges have you faced, John, over that period of time? What I'm going to guess that you've faced a lot of challenges. So, but what has been the biggest challenge for you to get to now being a business owner for so long?
Yeah. I would say, managing a team in a business setting is probably the hardest thing I've done. So it's things like managing staff development, well-being, career development. If I'm honest, it's not something we've completely cracked. In fact, I don't think you ever completely crack it, but it's definitely a work in progress. And obviously it's kind of old news now, but everyone's gone through COVID and low productivity and staff quitting, in the years since COVID. It's been a bit of an issue. But as I mentioned, we run wraparound venues. So at times when you've got staff off ill, it can seem like crisis management because obviously you've got provisions that are Ofsted registered where parents are relying on you and you need to run them and you need to find staff quite quickly. And as you know, in a kind of sports-based sports coaching setting, you can't suddenly just find staff off the street. They've got to be, DBS checked. They've got to have all the relevant qualifications. And so it can take time to kind of solve those staffing headaches. So I would say probably managing staff to make sure that all our venues are covered is one of the most challenging things that we've faced, really, along with all the other companies that work in our sector, I think.
Yeah. I think many will resonate with you on that one. And has that changed over time, John? Was it always been people, or have you seen changes over time, or people the biggest headache you've got there?
That, and I would say we were quite late to the party. So a lot of companies were getting started. I mean, we all know about the journeys of some of the big multi-regional companies that are national based. They got started in the sort of early 2000s. We were a little bit late in that. We were kind of sort of 2012 through to 2018 really getting going. So being late to the party and then entering a slightly more crowded marketplace, I think made it a little bit more challenging. So alongside staffing, I'd say probably, marketing and gaining traction in schools and, and securing, new work. That's obviously quite a difficult challenge as well, but something that we embrace and we're getting a lot better at, I think.
And John, one more thing on that with Fiesta. What's the differentiator? You mentioned there you entered the market. It was quite busy.
Yeah.
Lots of other organisations doing the same thing in the school's eyes. But how did you stand out from the crowd?
Yeah, good question. I'd like to think quality of coaching and quality of delivery. So we're not just, turning up in a van and putting some cones down and then taking the money off parents. We're really trying to build longer term relationships and, have that real quality of delivery. And that means alongside that, there's a lot of quality assurance. Our senior team go in and observe staff a lot to make sure that they are delivering what we expect them to be delivering. And if they're not, we give them feedback and we try and support them to improve. I think it's that quality assurance that's the big differentiator, certainly when we started.
And John, since founding Fiesta back in 2012, how would you say you've developed or evolved as a leader?
Yeah, that's a good question again. I would say probably when I started, I was a little bit naive in the sense that I thought that people should behave like me. I think we probably all go through this at some point, don't we? Where, if you've got a coaching style, and I like to think I've got quite a distinctive coaching style, when I started, I thought that people should deliver like me, say the sort of same things as I'm saying, behave like me. But what I've realized is that there's lots of ways to do things successfully and that you need to kind of really use the strengths of your team and the different ways to deliver effectively. So you've got to give staff the freedom as well to be able to experiment and do things their way. And I think that's probably one of the biggest lessons I've learned from when I started to where I am now. But being older and wiser, it's easy to say that, isn't it, really?
But what prompted that realization that actually not everyone needs to act or coach lightly? Was there like a point where you had a conversation with someone, you read something, you heard something, you thought, actually, yes, that's probably a good way to go?
I think, I read a lot. I listen to a lot of audiobooks, and I would say that has helped certainly, but just really from interactions with staff, doing observations of lessons or coaching sessions, and then that realization that actually that person's done a really successful lesson They've done it completely differently to how I do it. But do you know what? It's just as good, if not better than what I would have done. And actually celebrating that rather than, it just being about me and how I want to do things. So yeah, it's been a gradual transition, I'd say.
Yeah. And you mentioned Vicky earlier, the co-director at Fiesta. You've also got people like Georgia as well on your senior team. So at Fiesta, when you do identify someone, either internally or externally, that can come and help drive the business forward, become a member of the senior team, how do you go about developing them and empowering them to be able to do that?
Yeah, so we've got a program of CPD. We often pay for courses. We contribute to courses so that staff can go and develop. If they say they would like to do a course, we'll often encourage them to do that. I think we also set quite challenging goals and targets, have regular feedback meetings as well. And we lead by example, I think. So I think it's important, obviously, to give staff the freedom to express themselves, to take ownership of projects and, to see how they get on and let them make mistakes to a certain extent as well. Because if you're constantly sort of, picking up on things and doing it your way, you don't really get the best out of people. So embracing failure and also obviously having a mission statement. And like most coaching companies, that mission statement of, being child-centered, really trying to get the best outcomes for young people and getting them more physically active than they have been, because there's obviously massive problems of obesity and lacking physical activity.
And you mentioned there that you have regular kind of feedback loops or feedback catch-ups with your team. And I give many listeners on this episode, well, I've got a remote team. How do you actually keep people engaged if, they're out in schools all day? You don't necessarily have that face-to-face contact all the time. So is having those regular meetings with your team crucial in your eyes in terms of not just monitoring the goals that you talked about and kind of KPIs, but actually keep them engaged, having a kind of team culture that's really positive?
Definitely. That team culture is everything, really, isn't it? And I think staff expect to have regular check-ins now. That's one of the big sort of takeaways we've had since COVID, that staff want to feel involved. They want to feel looked after. They want to feel like they're part of something. So having those regular check-ins is vital, whether that be in person. We're increasingly doing more of those, or, occasionally by Zoom or video call as well. I think, you can do a bit of a hybrid of both, can't you, really? But definitely staff want to feel like they're loved and that they're part of something. So we do try to plan those in. We try to have regular meetings. Again, learning from mistakes. I think perhaps during COVID, we'd have lots of video meetings and we'd tell staff what they weren't doing right, and it became quite a negative thing. But reflecting on that, we tried to make it a lot more positive now and have regular check-ins with staff.
John, innovation plays a big part in the development and the growth of Fiesta. And I know we spoke about this many times. When it comes to engaging more children in physical activity, what does Fiesta do from an innovation perspective? And how do you make sure, I guess it's almost coming back to how do you stand out from the crowd again? But what do you do that's different from an innovation perspective?
Yeah, so I think you have to embrace innovation. Otherwise, you're not growing and developing as a company or as a person, really. So we're looking to grow. So the first thing I think we do is we embrace new activities. So things like swim ed. We're obviously a swim ed provider with pop-up pools. We also have embraced activities like laser tag. So those kind of activities that are perhaps sort of run of the mill, and they're a little bit different from what other companies are delivering. I think secondly, we embrace new technologies. So that might mean, cloud-based systems to improve workflow. Everything is digital now. We're currently experimenting with AI. I think everybody is. We don't really know where that's going to end up, but we're experimenting with that for our sales funnels and also workflows. And, increasingly, I think you write an email or a campaign and you put it through ChatGPT or Copilot, which is the Windows one, and you see how that could be improved. I think also that we're quick to embrace, any sort of new technologies. Like we were one of the first companies to embrace an all digital sign-in. So even if you were to go back 5 or 6 years, a lot of companies were still doing sort of paper registers. We moved to using iPads, having everything all cloud-based, partly because of GDPR and making sure that we're safeguarding people's data. Everything's locked away behind a password. So those are some of the things, as well as I think embracing new coaching techniques and styles. what we're not trying to do is to kind of follow the shiny penny and try and do everything. We're just trying to innovate where we can, really.
Yeah, that's great. And there's a few things there, John, isn't there? There's a lot you're doing. And like you say, innovation isn't always about developing new programs and delivering those programs and services. It's about streamlining, improving systems, processes, content, like you said there. Using AI is certainly one that myself and Luke could probably get more people on so we can share some of the great work that's been done in various sectors.
It's exciting to think where that's going to end up, really. I mean, we don't really know, what platform was going to be the dominant one, how it's going to be implemented. So we're just on this kind of learning journey, aren't we, all together with AI? So.
Absolutely. And like you say, very exciting. And I think I did a workshop a few weeks ago, and it's still a surprise. I think it's something like 45% of businesses in the UK are using AI, which is a big surprise to me because I thought it'd be a lot more than that. But if organizations aren't using it regularly, they're going to get left behind very quickly. And those that are using it from a positive perspective, we talk about that kind of compound effect, whether that be around improved processes, improved sales, improved lead generation, improved productivity. That will really start to ramp up. So if you are using AI, well done, keep using it, keep experimenting. If you're not, what are you doing? Take some time out, learn, read about it, investigate it, get in contact with us. We've used it since 2022, pretty much now. So get back in touch and we can
just to add to that, Luke, as well. It will be interesting to see how it pans out because I don't know if you've ever received one of these kind of AI marketing calls yet. Have you received one of those?
I think I have.
Yeah, I definitely have, where it's like a voice on the end of the phone and you think you're speaking to a real person, but then, you realize that it's not. I think there will be a plethora of those kind of calls and marketing techniques. And then there'll be the opportunity for perhaps the more personalized approach, whereby it's someone in person actually, speaking to you on the end of the phone. So just be interesting to see how it all plays out, I think.
Yeah. And then how long, John, until we actually see a Tesla bot that actually becomes a coach or a teacher in the education space? We'll wait and see. Yeah. I think with regards to that, I know you said already, it's tough for businesses at the moment, whether that be lead generation, generating new sales revenue, employing the right people, keeping the right people. I think for me, and I know I've had this conversation with you before, that access to finance as well is a headache at the moment. But access to finance is crucial for innovation and for growth. What are you doing in that, John, at the moment? How are Fiesta looking at ways they can access finance and invest in the business?
Yeah, this is something that really interests me. I'm very passionate about. There's definitely pots of funding out there, and it's a mixture really of luck, but also being very persistent and looking for opportunities. So definitely sort of planning into your schedule. I think people in our kind of sector need to be scheduling time every week, every couple of weeks, every month to look for opportunities online and elsewhere for funding. And then setting aside time to do bids, because you'll know yourselves, guys, how long it takes to do bids. And sometimes you get pushbacks and you have to resubmit, and it's quite a lengthy process. But we've definitely explored funding opportunities and we've been successful in many areas in terms of funding. So an example would be SEMLEP funding. So a lot of people will know it as the sort of local enterprise partnership funding. Ours is called the South East Midlands Local Enterprise Partnership, SEMLEP. I think it's disbanded now, but we applied for funding there starting in 2020, 2021, and were successful in getting funding for various projects, actually. So we got a grant for new computers, IT equipment, iPads. We even got a grant for a ball launcher and some signage for Fiesta for our camps. And then last summer, we managed to get funding for one of our pop-up pools. We had to match the funding, but that meant that we could access the SwimEd program, and we're now a SwimEd partner. So yeah, there's lots of opportunities out there. You just obviously need to keep your ear to the ground and keep looking. Another example of funding that we got was local authority funding for our wraparound provision that started just recently for a school in Leicestershire. And that's been massive, really, in terms of being able to subsidise wraparound places for before and after school provision in that school.
That's great. And I think just one thing for me on this, I think from our experience as well, I'm not sure if you'll agree on this one, John, but a bit of old school relationship building is, I think, crucial when it comes to
accessing funding, because there's so many rabbit holes you can go down, and there's so many opportunities out there that a lot of the time small businesses are completely unaware of it, because no disrespect to the organizations that are giving this funding out, they're not the best in communicating what's available. Sometimes that may be done purposely, but I think quite often money has to be spent. So in particular, this time of year in March, year end, money has to be spent. So build relationships. John, you mentioned local enterprise partnerships. I think they've all disbanded now, and they're all coming under local authority, which may or may not be a good thing for some local people in local authorities. It just tends to mean that there's more red tape, I guess, and the process could take a little longer. But I'm aware that some local authorities are looking at that process and how can they make access to finance with regards to grants easier for small businesses, which is great.
Yes. And getting in contact with those people who are in those positions, maybe sending them an email. I mean, that's important. But you're absolutely right. Your network is your net worth. And so networking with people, going to regular networking events. And I can't emphasize enough, because this comes in from the property side of things that I do, telling people what you do. One of the things I haven't mentioned there is actually the funding opportunities that are from sort of private capital, private finance. Just simply telling people what you do. There are investors out there who want to get a better return on their money. And if you've got a project that can, generate wealth and income and can give them a return on their money, there are people who might be able to finance you. Obviously, you have to jump through the hoops. There are certain laws in terms of sort of joint ventures and advertising for finance. But from my sort of property businesses, I've actually raised in the last 18 months, £500,000 just in terms of private equity from private investors. So there are opportunities out there. Just tell people what you do.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that, John. Really useful.
Yeah. Then just on the, you obviously get really successful, John, over the time when you have managed to access different types of finance and funding. What headaches are involved? We've talked about kind of finding the opportunities, because they might not be kind of in your face when you're looking for them. But in terms of the application process and then becoming successful in getting that investment, what are the typical headaches that you've had to overcome?
Yeah, really good question. So I think the first thing is untying the grants from the loans. A lot of people will advertise things online that look like grants, but actually they're loans. Now, a loan can work for some people, but a lot of people want a grant. They don't have to pay back. I think pushbacks, actually, stalling yourself and being resilient to pushbacks and failures. So when you submit an application, you can expect, there might be a big chance that you won't be successful in that funding application, but you might be able to resubmit it. I'll give you an example. For that first SEMLEP bid that we did, we were rejected and they pilloried us. They said, this is an awful proposal. It's too vague. You're doing so many different things. And they were probably right. And at the time, I spoke to my dad at the time and I said, this is ridiculous. I'm going to make a complaint. I'm going to write into them and I'm going to tell them what I think of them. And he said, don't do that. Praise them for what they've done. Say, thank you so much for your feedback. We really appreciate it. And do what they've said, resubmit. And that's what we did. And we were successful. But if I'd kind of, done what I initially thought and complained, we definitely wouldn't have got that funding and it wouldn't have led on to other bits of funding later on. So definitely pushbacks. I also think companies in what we might call sort of semi-rural locations, like what we are, we're not in a big city, but we're not out in the sticks either. I personally think it is more challenging as well.
The phrase, what gets measured gets managed, was coined by the American management consultant Pete Drucker over 40 years ago. Although there have been some alternatives to this phrase, one that resonates with me is what gets measured gets improved.
In recent years, this alternative phrase has gained popularity, emphasising the idea that measuring progress is crucial to achieving improvement.
Scorecards are a great way to highlight your strengths and identify blind spots in your organisation while providing instant, actionable steps on how you can improve that needs improving.
So, how does your organisation measure up?
Head to capscorecard.scoreapp.com and take approximately 5 minutes to answer some yes/no questions. Once you've done that, you will get an instant personalised report tailored to your organisation with clear, actionable steps. And it's totally free.
That's capscorecard.scoreapp.com, and the link will be in the show notes too.
But it's just, it's just keeping your ear to the ground and actually focusing on those things. There are also charities that will give you loans. So, for example, there's the Thomas White Loan Charity, for example, in Leicestershire, where if you are a startup business, they will loan you £20,000, absolutely, interest-free for 5 years. You don't have to start paying it back. So there are some charities and organisations like that. I don't know what it's like in other areas, but they will loan you money for a very low interest rate. I mean, that's an amazing deal, really.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And if someone doesn't really know their contact at the local authority or of a charity in their area that will offer things like that, where would you typically look? If you start from scratch, where would you advise people start looking for opportunities?
So I try to find out who the person is in the local authority who deals with funding, and to try and get a contact, and then obviously to write an email or have a phone conversation with that person and be persistent. So the problem is a lot of people, they make one phone call, they do one email, and then they give up because they haven't think back. You've got to kind of keep going. So that's really important. And then obviously just to keep looking online, try to sign up to various groups. You might get a lot of spam email offering you loans, but within that, there might be the odd gem where it might lead to a real funding opportunity. I'd also encourage people in your team, if they spot anything, they should be sending it to you. And I'd encourage business leaders and directors of companies to kind of tell their staff that they want to know about these kind of opportunities, because you can't hear about everything at all.
And you just finally on the kind of application side and looking for funding, you mentioned earlier that you schedule time in to actually do that activity. So would your final bit of advice be around accessing funding for people to prioritize it and put it down as a key activity to help if it is innovation that people are looking to do?
Definitely. If funding is such an important thing, we probably have it in the top sort of 5 things, problems, headaches that sports industry leaders that we have. It probably, if we're honest, funding ranks 10th or 11th down the list, doesn't it? It's not something we prioritize, but maybe it needs to be, because honestly, it can act as such a catalyst for growth. We would never have got our swimming pools without the funding. We wouldn't have moved to all digital signings with iPads and everything without funding. So it's crucial. Yeah. Schedule time every week, every month, if you can.
But John, once you've got that funding, you do so much already, but once you've got that funding, I know some grants may be tied to certain projects, like you mentioned the swim ed one and the LEP. How do you then prioritize what to focus on and develop and grow? Because that's a constant juggle for business owners anyway. But when you're given funds, quite often that you may have a period of time as well where that money has to be utilized by, so you can show impact, which is quite often job creation, right? So
yes.
How do you prioritize that?
So I think it would be related to what your kind of core goals are in your company. So if it's to do with wraparound, are you showing innovation in, offering a new service or a new program, or have you developed your website to be, accept bookings? There are actual funds target innovation. I think it's got to be related to your business model, really. There are funds available for marketing services related to marketing on your website. If I'm honest as well, if you look at it, a lot of the innovation funding focuses on sort of what might be sort of sexier industries, to do with developing a new engineering product. But who knows, could you adapt your bids to acquire some of that funding? Certainly when we approached for the LEP funding, we were competing with other businesses that were developing new engineering, high-tech products, but we're not really in that sector, but we made it work. So it's got to fit around your business model, really, wrap around or whatever it is.
Of course, John, I guess the advantage is in our sector that business owners need to be aware of the social impact and communicating that. So we need to be aware that when we are applying for funds, that actually the social impact that we have as businesses is really important. And it also makes the application interesting. I remember talking to someone probably about 6 months ago now, who said, "Do you know what? Your application was great because it was really nice to read and it was really interesting. It was something different. It was great to learn about the impact that you were having on physical activity in the community. And we weren't just reading another application about a new widget that's been designed in a factory production line. So it's worth bearing that in mind as well, I think, isn't it?
It is, agreed. And you mentioned a key thing there, actually having data to back up what you're saying. So if you can show social impact data and have figures that you've generated and how many hours it's going to benefit, young people in terms of physical activity, that's a massive bonus. I know there's been a lot of work on that in the partnership as well, hasn't there?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, data is crucial. And I should probably throw in there as well that people often miss, because we all have lots of them, no matter what sector you're in, and you do a good job, you get stacks of positive feedback, which means that you've got good social proof. It's actually making use of that social proof. So, we're actually telling a story, and we're telling a story through the eyes of our customers. And other customers or potential customers resonate more strongly with those individuals rather than react to us trying to sell something. So,
completely.
Yeah, really powerful.
Charlie, you mentioned wraparounds quite a few times, and I think that's a really exciting area of development for not just Fiesta. Your offer looks brilliant, but other organisations getting more on board with wraparound, since that funding and that requirement for schools to offer it to parents has come out. What's led to the growth or the focus on your wraparound services?
Yeah, so obviously wraparound, just to explain to people, is before and after school provision. So it's usually from anywhere like 7:30 in the morning through to sort of 9 o'clock or the start of the school day. And then it's that after school provision from sort of 3 o'clock or whenever the school day ends to roughly about 6 o'clock. And the thing about wraparound is it's a little bit more structured than a basic sandwich club. I think schools have been doing those kind of sandwich club type activities where they're sort of sat doing puzzles and things after school, or maybe doing the odd club. They've been doing that for a long time. But wraparound, you have to be Ofsted registered. It has to be much more structured. I think wraparound is here to stay because obviously it's got the government backing, and schools obviously are now required to have wraparound, certainly by the end of this year. And I think it's a good model to follow, certainly for us, because it's recession proof. Parents are needing to work increasingly long hours because of the cost of living. Probably both parents in a lot of families are having to work. So that 9 till 3 model that most schools still operate, or 9 till 3:30, doesn't actually work for a lot of parents because they need, longer hours provision. And that's where wraparound comes in. So it's growing, it's recession proof. And I think we've been successful in it in terms of approaching schools quite early. And we've actually offered a really good service to schools. So we've had several inspections now. We've been praised for the service that we've been offering. We haven't just gone in and done a sandwich club and offered crisps for tea. So we've offered obviously high standard snacks that are healthy. We've offered high quality activities, both sports activities as well as kind of childcare activities, creative play, that kind of thing, arts and crafts. And I think that's really resonated with parents, really, because they want to know that their children are doing something structured before and after school. Don't get me wrong, we do occasionally do things like an Xbox activity, but it's usually like a treat, at the end of the day or once a week. So we do fun stuff like that, but we have a clear program. And then I think, just to answer your question finally, we did a big marketing push for wraparound to really drive this forward into schools. We used that kind of they ask, we answer kind of technique, whereby we were doing YouTube videos and social media videos about some of the main issues or questions that parents might have or school leaders might have about wraparound. And then I was there answering them, or one of the team was there answering them on the video, so that people could see that we were kind of experts in our field. So when you type in wraparounds, we actually, on the videos, we show up relatively highly on that, because we were one of the first people to kind of start answering questions on it at Fiesta Sports.
Brilliant. And as someone who's very confident on camera, John, and for those that haven't seen your videos, I suggest definitely go onto your YouTube and have a look. So, videoing yourself, especially, and then publicizing it on YouTube, could be daunting for some people. If people do want to get their message out, and we think video is absolutely the right way to go, what kind of tips would you give? I guess if you look back to when you maybe weren't as confident, what kind of helped you get over that kind of maybe anxiety or fear of doing it?
Yeah. The easiest way to get started is to get started. That was one of the best bits of advice. So when you first start, you might not be very polished. But what I've learned from doing lots of videos is that actually not being very polished comes across as quite authentic, because we watch so many kind of polished presentations now. There's so many marketing agencies out there, but actually having something that isn't quite polished to that level actually is quite authentic and quite engaging. So don't worry about that. Just get started. And obviously, if you can record yourself regularly and consistently, you will get better at it through time. Obviously, if you can ask other people to give you feedback on your videos, it's helpful as well. Everyone, when they first start, has to do it, several takes. That's normal. You might have to spend an hour right in front of the camera to do a 1-minute clip. That's normal. That happens. But over time, you get better with experience. It's like with anything, practice maybe not makes perfect, but it definitely makes you better and more confident. So I'm at the point now where I'm not good at it, but I could stand in front of the camera and do a 1-minute reel, probably first or second go, and get my message across just because I've practiced at it and I've gone through those hurdles, really. And I'm sure you guys are the same. It's not something that's, comfortable, but you have to get out of your comfort zone.
It's been a whirlwind. It's been brilliant. Been so many great nuggets of information that you shared with us. I really do appreciate it. I think one thing for me, where do you see Fiesta in 5 years' time?
So continuing to be leaders in our area. I mean, I don't expect us to be like a national company. We don't have ambitions to do that, but we work at Fiesta Sports Coaching. We operate in the East Midlands. So within our area to kind of be one of the most highly regarded companies, obviously developing our programs like swim ed, our school programs, and particularly our wraparound programs as well. So hopefully people will check us out and see that we're a really good coaching company and moving forward.
John, good to have those ambitions. And one more thing, we usually ask people at the back end of this pod their recommendations. Now, I know this could be the trickiest question for you because I know you love your books. So what 3 books, podcasts, or people would you recommend ever to potentially read, follow, or listen to?
Well, I'm very much about investing in yourself and investing, we will work very hard. I think a lot of business leaders work exceptionally hard, but what are you actually doing with your money once you've earned it? And I'm very focused on financial education for youngsters as well. It's something I'm working on outside of what I'm doing here. My number one recommendation, you have to read this book, it's called Secrets of the Millionaire Mind by T. Harv Eker. I cannot recommend this book enough. Everyone should read it. I mean, we've probably all heard Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. That's a good one as well. But Secrets of the Millionaire Mind by T. Harv Eker, I think should be on everyone's list. So I'm not going to give you 3 because I think really that should be the main one that everybody should listen to. I think it's just a brilliant book and it talks about the principles for sort of wealth generation, helping people and things like that.
Fantastic. Thanks, John. It's been, like I said, lots of nuggets shared there. We've covered a lot in a very short space of time. So really appreciate you doing that. As we've heard on the pod, you've got lots going on. You're juggling a lot of things. So really appreciate you giving us 40 odd minutes of your time to dive into the world of John Mulholland and Fiesta and beyond. So really appreciate it so much and we'll catch up soon.
Been a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on. Speak soon, guys.
Thanks, John.
Search for the Active Code on your podcast app. Let's work together to get more people more active more often.